The escape pod shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of planet Kyorin. Inside, Lieutenant Jeho Park held tight to his seat straps, his jaw clenched. Warning lights flashed red across the small control panel. The pod's computer repeated the same message over and over. Warning. Landing systems damage. Jeho watched through the small window as flames surrounded the pod. His dark combat suit was torn in several places, showing cuts and burns from his escape from the dying spaceship. He thought about his team members who didn't make it. 10 good soldiers, all gone in the surprise attack. Computer, give me a report on the planet below, Jeho said, trying to keep his voice steady. His hands moved quickly over the controls, fighting to keep the pod stable. Planet Kyorin. Atmosphere. Breathable. Gravity. 0.9 Earth standard. Warning. No contact with human settlements detected. Warning. Unknown energy signatures detected. The pod broke through the clouded layer. Jeho saw a vast green landscape below. In the distance, he could make out what looked like a city, all smooth curves and tall spires that seemed to grow from the ground like crystal trees. But he had no time to admire the view. The pod was falling too fast. Come on, Jeho muttered, pulling hard on the emergency landing controls. The ground was getting closer by the second. He could see a forest clearing ahead, his best chance for survival. The pod crashed through the treetops, breaking branches as it fell. With a huge bang, it hit the ground and slid forward, leaving a long trail of torn earth behind it. Jeho's head slammed against the side of the pod, even with his safety straps on. Everything went dark for a moment. When he opened his eyes again, the pod had stopped moving. Smoke came from the control panel. The door was stuck, but Jeho still had his strength. He kicked it hard 3 times until it broke open. Fresh air rushed in. Jeho grabbed his emergency pack and crawled out. His legs felt weak, but nothing seemed broken. The forest around him was quiet except for sounds that reminded him of birds. The air smelled sweet, like flowers he had never smelled before. Jeho checked his equipment. His radio only gave him static. His location device was broken in the crash. He still had his pistol, some food, water, and basic medical supplies. It wasn't much for surviving on an unknown planet. Looking up through the trees, he could see 3 moons in the purple sky. The smallest one had a green color. Definitely not in Kansas anymore, he said to himself, remembering an old Earth movie his grandfather loved. A sound in the forest made him turn quickly. He heard something moving through the trees, something big. Training kicked in, and Jeho moved quietly to hide behind the crashed pod. He checked his pistol and waited. The sounds got closer. Jeho held his breath. Through gaps in the trees, he saw movement. Then they appeared, 3 tall figures in smooth white armor that seemed to flow like water. They moved with grace that didn't seem human. Each carried what looked like weapons, though unlike any guns Jeho had seen before. They approached the crash site carefully. Jeho noticed something strange about their movements, their shapes. They reminded him of human women, but there was something different, almost alien in their grace. One of them spoke. To his surprise, his translation device worked. Crash site confirmed. Energy readings indicate advanced technology. Search for survivors. Jeho had to make a choice. He could try to hide and survive alone on this unknown planet, or he could show himself and hope these beings were friendly. Looking at his limited supplies and the alien world around him, he knew he really had only one option. Taking a deep breath, Jeho stepped out from behind the pod, his hands raised to show he wasn't a threat. "Hello," he said clearly, hoping his translation device would work both ways. "I come in peace." The 3 figures turned to him instantly, their weapons raised. Then they froze. Even through their helmets, Jeho could feel their shock. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Finally, one of them spoke, her voice filled with wonder and confusion. What kind of female are you?" Captain Yi Rin stared at the strange being before her. In all her years of space exploration and first contact missions, she had never seen anything quite like this. The creature was tall, with broad shoulders and a strong jaw. Its voice was deeper than any she had ever heard, and its body structure was completely different from her people. "Stand down," Yi-Rin ordered her team, though she kept her own weapon ready. "I am Captain Yi-Rin of the Kyorin Defense Force. Your translation device works well. Can you identify yourself?" Jai-Ho kept his hands raised. "I am Lieutenant Jai-Ho Park of Earth's Special Forces Unit 7. My ship was attacked, and I escaped in this pod. I mean no harm." The three Kyorin soldiers looked at each other. One of them, with silver markings on her armor, whispered to Yi-Rin, "Captain, its body structure. Could it be a male?" Yi-Rin's eyes widened behind her helmet. She had read about males in ancient texts and biological studies of other planets, but their civilization had evolved past the need for gender differences thousands of years ago. No one on Kyorin had seen a male of any species in living memory. "Lieutenant Park," Yi-Rin said carefully, "you are a male human." Jai-Ho nodded slowly. "Yes. Is that unusual here?" The third soldier, who had been scanning him with a small device, suddenly spoke up. "Captain, these readings are fascinating. The hormone levels, the genetic structure, it's completely different from ours." Yi-Rin stepped forward, lowering her weapon completely. "Lieutenant Park, you must understand. Our civilization has not seen a male of any species in over 3,000 years. We have evolved to reproduce through advanced biological engineering. You are, quite literally, unique on our world." Jai-Ho tried to process this information. A whole planet of just women. No wonder they were so confused by his appearance. He noticed they were moving closer, their initial fear turning into intense curiosity. "Please," Yi-Rin said, removing her helmet to reveal a face with delicate features and silver-white hair. "We must take you to our city. Our scientists will want to study you. For purely diplomatic reasons, of course." The way she said it made Jai-Ho nervous, but he didn't have much choice. "What about my pod? It contains important data about the war." "War?" Yi-Rin asked sharply. "What war?" "Earth is fighting against an AI force called the Axis. They're trying to wipe out all organic life. That's who attacked my ship." This news seemed to concern the Kyorin soldiers deeply. They spoke quickly among themselves in their native language, which Jai-Ho's translator couldn't quite catch. Finally, Yi-Rin turned back to him. "We will recover your pod. But first, we must get you to safety. Our scanners show more ships entering this sector. If you are at war, we cannot risk being discovered." As if to emphasize her point, a distant boom echoed across the sky. Everyone looked up to see a streak of light passing overhead. Another ship entering the atmosphere. "Quickly," Yi-Rin said, gesturing to a sleek vehicle that had somehow appeared silently at the edge of the clearing. "We must reach Neo-Sol before others find you." As they hurried to the vehicle, Jai-Ho noticed the Kyorin soldiers kept glancing at him when they thought he wasn't looking. Their professional demeanor was starting to crack, showing increasing signs of fascination and something else he couldn't quite identify. The vehicle rose silently into the air. Through its transparent walls, Jai-Ho watched the forest fall away below them. In the distance, he could see the crystal-like towers he had glimpsed during his descent. They sparkled in the light of the three moons, beautiful but alien. "Lieutenant Park," Yi-Rin said, her voice carrying an odd mix of authority and curiosity. "Welcome to Kyorin. I must warn you, you're about to become the most interesting person on our planet." Looking at the three soldiers who couldn't seem to take their eyes off him, Jai-Ho had a feeling that was a massive understatement. The research center in Neo-Sol was unlike anything Jai-Ho had ever seen. The walls seemed to be alive, shifting colors with each person who walked past. The air smelled fresh, like a spring morning, despite being inside a massive building. Head scientist Hainul walked around Jai-Ho for the 5th time, making notes on her transparent tablet. Her white lab coat flowed around her like water, and her eyes shone with excitement. Unlike the soldiers who wore their silver-white hair long and straight, Haynul's was cut short, marking her as part of the science division. "Fascinating," she said, reaching out to touch Jai-Ho's arm. "The muscle density is remarkable. And you say all human males are built this way?" Jai-Ho tried not to show his discomfort. In the 3 hours since arriving at the research center, he had been touched, scanned, and studied by more scientists than he could count. "More or less," he answered, "though some are bigger, some smaller. There are more variations." Haynul's eyes grew even wider. She turned to her team of scientists, who were all watching with intense interest. "We must document everything." "Excuse me," Jai-Ho said firmly, stepping back. "I'm happy to help with your research, but I'm a soldier, not a test subject. I need to speak with your leaders about the war." Haynul blinked, as if remembering something. "Oh yes, the war." She looked disappointed. "The council will meet with you soon, but surely we can continue our studies while we wait." Before Jai-Ho could answer, an alarm sounded through the building. The walls turned red, and a voice spoke in the Kyoran language. Haynul's expression changed from excitement to worry. "What's wrong?" Jai-Ho asked, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. They had taken his pistol when he arrived. "Ships have entered our atmosphere," Haynul explained. "Many ships. They're not ours." Jai-Ho's heart sank. "The Axis. They must have followed my pod's trail." He turned to Haynul. "Your people are in danger. The Axis destroys all organic life it finds. You need to prepare for battle." Haynul shook her head. "We are a peaceful society. We haven't fought a war in thousands of years." "Then today might be the day you have to remember how," Jai-Ho said. He looked at the scared faces around him and made a decision. "Let me help. I know how they think, how they fight." "But you're too valuable to risk," one of the scientists protested. "You're the only male specimen we have." Jai-Ho felt his patience snap. "I am not a specimen. I am a soldier, and right now, your world is in danger. Either give me back my weapon and let me help, or watch your peaceful society burn." The room fell silent. Haynul stared at him, seeing him in a new light. For the first time, she wasn't looking at him as a fascinating biological curiosity, but as a warrior, someone who knew things her people had forgotten. Finally, she nodded. "I'll take you to the defense command. But first," she pressed a button on her tablet, and a section of the wall opened to reveal his combat suit, cleaned and repaired, along with his weapon. "You fixed them?" Jai-Ho asked, surprised. "We learned much from studying your equipment," Haynul said. "Now, perhaps you can teach us how to use what we learned." As Jai-Ho quickly changed into his combat suit, he could hear more alarms joining the first. Through the living walls of the research center, he saw ships appearing in the purple sky, dark shapes that brought death to every world they found. "Come," Haynul said, her voice stronger now. "It's time to show us what a human male can really do." The Defense Command Center of Neo-Sol was in chaos. Screens showed hundreds of Axis ships entering the atmosphere. Commander Desam stood at the center of the room, her tall frame rigid with anger as she watched Jai-Ho and Haynul enter. "Why is this male here?" Desam demanded, her voice sharp. "He brought this danger to our world. He should be in containment." "Commander," Haynul stepped forward. "Lieutenant Park knows these enemies. He can help us." "Help us?" Desam laughed bitterly. "Look at our screens. These ships followed him here. Our perfect society survived 3,000 years without males or war. Now we have both in one day." Jai-Ho ignored her anger and walked to the main display. "Your planetary shields," he said, studying the readouts. "They're based on energy deflection." "Right. Our shields are none of your concern," Desam snapped. "They are when I can see they won't stop the Axis," Jai-Ho replied calmly. "Their ships are designed to absorb energy. Your shields will make them stronger." The room fell silent. Hey Newell moved to a control panel, her fingers flying over the controls. "He's right," she said, her voice tight with worry. "The enemy ships are using our shield energy to power their weapons." Dasum's face paled. "Impossible. Our technology is perfect." "No technology is perfect," Jaiho said. "But we can use this. I've fought the Axis before. I know how to beat them." Captain Yurin, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. "Commander, we must listen. We haven't faced war in generations. We need his help." Dasum's hands clenched into fists. "You're all being fooled by his male presence. Can't you see? This is how it begins. First, we let him command us in battle. Then what? Will we give up everything our ancestors built? Return to the old ways?" "Commander," Hey Newell said firmly, "right now our choice is simple. Accept his help or watch our world burn." The first explosions shook the building. Through the massive windows, they could see Axis ships firing at the city's outer districts. The beautiful crystal towers began to crack. "We don't have time for this," Jaiho said. He turned to Yirin. "Captain, your ships have manual controls." "Yes, but we haven't used them in." "Today, you'll use them," Jaiho interrupted. "The Axis AI can predict automated systems, but they struggle against unpredictable human pilots." He looked at Hey Newell. "Can you modify your weapons to fire physical projectiles instead of energy beams?" Newell nodded slowly. Yes, we can convert the matter replicators. But our pilots have never trained for combat." "Then it's time for a crash course," Jaiho said. He turned to face the room of frightened but determined faces. "I know you're scared. I know you don't trust me. But right now, we all want the same thing: to save your world." Another explosion rocked the building. Dasum looked from the destruction outside to Jaiho, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. "Commander," Jaiho said quietly, "you can arrest me after we win. But first, let me teach your people how to fight." For a long moment, Dasum stood silent. Finally, she gave a sharp nod. "Captain Yurin, gather our best pilots. Hey Newell, begin the weapons modifications." She fixed Jaiho with a cold stare. "If you betray us, male, I will end you myself." Jaiho allowed himself a small smile. "Fair enough. Now let me show you how Earth fights back." In the massive hangar beneath Neo Sol, Jaiho stood before 50 of Kyorin's best pilots. Their ships, elegant vessels that looked like silver birds, were being modified according to his instructions. Hey Newell's team worked quickly, converting energy weapons to physical projectile launchers. "The Axis thinks in patterns," Jaiho explained, his voice echoing in the large space. "They expect you to fight like machines. Perfect, predictable, logical. To beat them, you must be unpredictable." "But unpredictable means inefficient," one pilot protested. "Our training focuses on perfect execution." "Perfect is predictable," Jaiho said firmly. "In battle, sometimes the wrong move at the right time is better than the right move at the wrong time." Captain Yurin, standing beside him, nodded slowly. "Like in ancient dance forms, sometimes the beauty comes from the imperfect step." "Exactly," Jaiho smiled, grateful for her understanding. He noticed several pilots staring at his smile with intense interest and quickly became serious again. "Now let me show you basic combat maneuvers." As Jaiho demonstrated flight patterns using the hangar's holographic system, Hey Newell approached with a tablet. "Lieutenant, the weapon modifications are complete, but I found something interesting in your combat suit's data." Jaiho looked at the display. His eyes widened. "These energy readings, they're similar to your shield technology." "Yes," Hey Newell said excitedly. "Your suit doesn't just block energy, it redirects it. If we could apply this principle to our ships, we could turn the Axis power against them." Jaiho finished. For the first time since arriving on Kyorin, he felt real hope. A group of engineers joined them, eager to help modify the ships. As they worked, Jiho noticed something changing in how the Kyoran women interacted with him. Their initial shock at his male presence was being replaced by respect for his knowledge and experience. Even Commander Desum, watching from a distance, seemed less hostile. She approached as Jiho was explaining a particularly difficult maneuver. "These tactics," she said quietly, "they go against everything we believe about perfect order and harmony." Jiho turned to her. "Sometimes the greatest harmony comes from embracing chaos. Your society achieved amazing things through order and control. But against the Axis, we need something they can't predict." Daesum studied him for a long moment. Perhaps there are things we have forgotten in our pursuit of perfection." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the hangar. Newell rushed to a communication panel. "The Axis ships have broken through the outer defense grid. They're heading for the city center." "How long until the modifications are complete?" Jiho asked. 10 minutes for the first squadron," Newell replied. "That's all we need," Jiho said. He turned to the pilots. "Who's ready to fly?" Every hand in the room went up. Jiho saw determination in their eyes, replacing the fear from earlier. These women might have forgotten war, but they remembered courage. "Lieutenant," Yiren stepped forward. "I want you in my wing. You know these enemies best. A male flying our ships." Daesum frowned, but there was less anger in her voice than before. "Our ancestors would be shocked." "Our ancestors aren't here," Newell said firmly. "We are, and we need every advantage we can get." Above them, the sounds of battle grew closer. Jiho looked at the faces around him. Scientists, pilots, engineers, all working together, all trusting him despite their cultural differences. "Let's show the Axis that perfect order isn't the only path to victory," he said. "Sometimes the best solutions come from embracing what's different." The first squadron of modified Kyoran ships rose from the underground hangar into the chaos above. Jiho sat in the co-pilot seat next to Captain Yiren, watching as the beautiful crystal towers of Neo-Seoul burned around them. The purple sky was filled with dark Axis ships, their metal forms blocking out the light of the three moons. "Remember your training," Jiho said through the communication system. "Fight unpredictably. Don't follow patterns. Trust your instincts." Axis ships approaching from all directions, Yiren reported. Her hands moved smoothly over the controls, guiding their ship higher. "They're trying to surround us." The squadron of 20 ships formed a loose circle, following Jiho's instructions. The Axis vessels, expecting the usual perfect Kyoran formations, hesitated for a moment. "Now," Jiho commanded, "break formation. Attack at will." The Kyoran ships scattered in all directions. Jiho watched with pride as the pilots used their new tactics, flying in ways that defied logical prediction. The modified weapons fired physical projectiles that the Axis ships couldn't absorb or deflect. "It's working." Newell's voice came through the communication system from the command center. "The Axis ships can't predict your movements." But then something changed. A new voice cut through their communications. Commander Desum's. "This is wrong. We cannot abandon our ways. All ships, return to standard formation." "Commander, what are you doing?" Yiren demanded. "Saving our culture," Desum replied. "I've taken control of the command center. Our ancestors built perfection. I won't let it be destroyed by male combat tactics." Jiho watched in horror as many ships began returning to their old, predictable patterns. The Axis immediately adapted, their weapons finding easy targets. 3 ships lost. Someone reported. 4 more damaged. "Daesum, you're killing them," Jiho shouted. "Perfect formations won't work against these enemies. Better to die pure than life corrupted." Daesum's voice was filled with fanatic determination. "Security forces are moving to arrest the male now. All ships maintain standard attack patterns." Yiren looked at Jiho, her face showing both worry and determination. "What should we do?" Jiho thought quickly. "Newell, are you there?" "Yes," her voice came through weakly. Desum's forces haven't reached my secondary lab yet. The energy redirect system we developed. Can you upload it to all ships? Yes, but in formation, it won't matter. They'll still be predictable. Upload it anyway, Jaiho ordered. Yi Rin, get me back to the command center. That's suicide, Yi Rin protested. Desum's forces will arrest you. Then they arrest me, Jaiho said firmly. But first, I'm going to show them something important. Their ship broke from the battle, diving toward the command center's landing platform. Through the windows, they could see security forces gathering. What are you going to show them? Yi Rin asked as they landed. Jaiho checked the small device Hanul had given him earlier. That's sometimes the best way to preserve your culture is to let it grow into something new. Above them, more Kyorin ships fell to the Axis attacks. Time was running out, and Jaiho knew that the next few minutes would determine not just his fate, but the fate of this entire world. Jaiho and Yi Rin ran through the corridors of the command center. Security forces were everywhere, but many hesitated when they saw their captain with the human male. They reached the main control room just as Desum was giving new orders to the fleet. "Commander," Jaiho shouted as they burst in. "You need to see this." Security officers raised their weapons, but Desum held up her hand. "Let him speak. I want to hear his final words before arrest." Jaiho held up the small device Hanul had given him. "This contains the full data from my combat suit, not just the weapon systems, but the reason Earth is fighting the Axis." He activated the device. A hologram filled the room, showing images of worlds destroyed by the Axis. Planets turned to ash, civilizations wiped out, all organic life eliminated. "The Axis doesn't just want to defeat us," Jaiho explained. "They want to eliminate all organic life in the galaxy. They believe machines are the next step in evolution." Desum watched the images, her face growing pale. "How many worlds?" 17 so far, Jaiho said quietly. "Earth is fighting them not just for ourselves, but for all life in the galaxy. And now they've found Kyorin." Through the windows, they could see more Kyorin ships falling to the Axis attacks. The perfect formations that had served them for thousands of years were becoming their doom. "Your ancestors," Jaiho continued, "they built something amazing here, a perfect society. But the galaxy is changing. Sometimes holding too tightly to the past means losing the future." Hanul's voice came through the communication system. "Commander, the energy redirect system is ready for all ships, but it will only work if they break formation." Desum stood silent, watching her forces dying in their perfect patterns. Finally, she looked at Jaiho. "What would you have us do?" "Let go," Jaiho said simply. "Trust your pilots to find their own way. Perfection isn't about never changing. It's about adapting while keeping your core values." Another explosion rocked the building. On the screens, they could see the Axis ships moving toward the city center. Desum closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was new determination in her face. She pressed the communication button. "All ships, this is Commander Desum. I am lifting all formation restrictions. Use the humans' tactics. Fight as you see fit." The effect was immediate. The Kyorin ships broke their patterns, each pilot flying in their own style. The energy redirect system activated, turning the Axis power against them. "Look," Yi Rin pointed at the screens. The Axis ships were struggling to predict the now random movements of the Kyorin forces. "They can't adapt," Jaiho explained. "The Axis depends on patterns, on logic. They don't understand organic unpredictability." As they watched, the battle began to turn. One Axis ship fell, then another. The Kyorin pilots, freed from their rigid training, discovered their natural talent for combat. Hanul rushed into the control room. "The Axis is retreating. Their ships are leaving the atmosphere." Desum turned to Jaiho. "It seems we had forgotten something important in our quest for perfection." "What's that?" Jaiho asked. That the strongest societies are not those that never change, but those that know how to change without losing themselves. 1 month after the battle, Neo Seoul looked different. The crystal towers were being rebuilt, but now they included design elements from Earth architecture. It was a small change, but it symbolized something bigger. Kyorin was evolving. Jaiho stood in the grand meeting hall, wearing a formal uniform that combined Earth military style with Kyorin materials. Before him sat the High Council of Kyorin, ready to make a historic decision. Lieutenant Park, the head counselor, spoke. "You have changed our world in ways we never expected. Some of these changes were difficult, but they have made us stronger." Hanul, now promoted to Chief Science Advisor, stepped forward. "Our studies of Earth's combat technology, combined with our own advanced systems, have created defenses that even the Axis cannot overcome. We are ready to share these developments with Earth. And we are ready to learn from Earth in return," Commander Desam added. She had surprised everyone by becoming one of the strongest supporters of change after the battle. "Our perfect society doesn't need to become exactly like Earth's, but we can become something new, something better than either of us alone." Captain Yurin, standing beside Jaiho, smiled. "We've already begun training programs that combine Earth's combat experience with our technology. The next time the Axis attacks any world, they'll face pilots who understand both tradition and innovation." The head counselor raised her hand for silence. "Lieutenant Park, we have a proposition for you. We would like you to become the first Earth ambassador to Kyorin. You would help guide our worlds toward a future where we face our challenges together." Jaiho looked around the room. He saw how much had changed in just 1 month. The scientists who had once treated him like a specimen now saw him as a colleague. The soldiers who had feared his different ways now trained eagerly with Earth combat techniques. Even the council members who had worried about male influence now understood that strength could come from diversity. "I would be honored," Jaiho said, "but I have one condition." "Name it," the head counselor replied. "When we bring more humans here, both male and female, we need to prepare both sides better than I was prepared." He smiled slightly, maybe with fewer scientists trying to study them on their first day. Hanul blushed, but joined in the laughter that filled the room. "We've already designed cultural integration programs," she said, "though I can't promise some of us won't still be excited to meet new humans." "There will be challenges," Tosam admitted. "Change is never easy. But we've learned that holding too tightly to the past can blind us to the future." The head counselor stood. "Then let it be recorded. Today marks the beginning of a new alliance between Earth and Kyorin. Together, we will face the Axis and any other threats that come, not as perfect beings, but as people willing to learn from each other." As the council chamber filled with applause, Jaiho felt a deep sense of satisfaction. His crash landing on this strange world had led to something remarkable. Two civilizations, once separated by vast differences, had found strength in those very differences. "So, Ambassador Park," Yirin said quietly beside him, "ready for your next adventure?" Jaiho looked out the window at the city where crystal towers now stood beside Earth-style buildings. "Actually, I think the adventure is just beginning."